excited to meet with Jennifer face to face, I can say, right? over
Yeah.
the over this virtual world that we're now living in, and have a conversation about why it's so important to bring on, yes, they are amazing earrings. Why it's so
Thank you.
important for us to talk about, continue the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I shared the other day that it's really important that we continue the conversation, because that's the only way that we can truly ensure that this path, this trajectory that we're on in creating change, will actually continue to happen. So I'm really pleased to have Jennifer here with us, who's the head of talent, brand, global marketing, events, and communications for Discover Financial Services. Jen, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our team here.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. And it's so great to be here with you. It's so great to see you. And I first want to just thank Brand Innovators and this amazing community for having us on today and continuing to really support and focus on this topic. It is such an important one. And as Vanessa and I were talking about the other day, I can't think of a better community to be able to share this topic with, because it's an open community. We are very honest with each other. And, this is definitely a topic that can make a lot of people uncomfortable, right? There's a lot of emotion wrapped in it. And so, I definitely want to just encourage everyone out there that, this is a safe space. Please ask us questions, share comments with us. We want to really have an open dialogue and dig deep into this topic so that we can help push it forward, like Vanessa said. And so, as Vanessa mentioned, I run Employer Brand at Discover. And I've been in marketing for about 20 years, the last few years on the employer brand side. And I feel so fortunate to have made the leap to this side because, this is such an incredible time to be really at the intersection of consumer brand and employer brand. There's never been a better time. And so for those of you who are not familiar with employer brand, our work is really dedicated to sharing employee stories, talking about the value proposition that we have as an employer, and attracting candidates. And a big part of that is attracting diverse candidates. So I have a team focused on diversity, talent, and attraction. And we really focus on sharing stories of our employees. So that's a little bit more about me, Vanessa.
I love that. So we discovered in a kind of a pre-conversation that both Jen and I have strong marketing backgrounds, and I was sharing with her, how important it's been for me over the last few years to infuse the two passions that I have. One, definitely in the marketing and strategy space, integrated marketing as a whole, but also the passion I have for really helping people from the perspective of inspiring and motivating them to really be their authentic selves and live their best lives, to quote my old boss, Miss O. But in trying to get into this field, it was very challenging because I have a traditional marketing background, and so as we start talking about attracting talent, I'd love to hear your POV on what it's like to bring in someone who has a traditional marketing background into this space where we're really focused on community and work culture, and diving a little deeper into DE&I.
Yeah, such a great question, Vanessa. And as we talked about, I thought you had such a great point that as marketers, we are in a unique position to really help push this conversation forward because of the work we do to truly understand consumers and understand kind of what's happening from a cultural perspective. So in coming into this work, I think, really the first piece of it, and as we've seen, the companies that are really been getting a lot more accolades for the work and activity they're doing around diversity and inclusion. It's really always starts with values, right? The company values. And that's such an incredible part of why people join a company and why consumers choose you, right? And so in thinking about those values and from the perspective of Discover, this past year we have really strong values, and this past year our leaders took it to really overtly articulate those again and ensure that all of our employees understood those. So, we're focused on openness, on respect, on doing the right thing. And we wanted to make sure that for our employees that those values were articulated and that we started to create a safe space for our employees to be able to have conversations. And, again, I think as we talked about the other day, like, the importance of having psychological safety for your employees and for your teams, to be able to start to have these conversations and talk about where we have biases in our systems, both internally, but then also thinking about where we could be doing a lot more for our communities. And so I think you shared that great list of some brands that are doing some great work. And I don't know if you'd feel comfortable just sharing, who you think right now has been doing a good job at sharing their values and their commitment.
Yeah, that's a great question. I really, some of the brands that I've worked with in the past, I feel truly exemplify what it means to have a workspace that speaks to values both inwardly and outwardly. One of them is Procter and Gamble. I've always respected the brand, worked with them in the past, and saw how all of the employees that I've worked with truly exemplify the value of community and teamwork, both as it related to their own jobs and then as it relates to the communities outside of their world and really empowering them and supporting them, particularly underrepresented communities. And I think that's, what's really important here as we're talking about brands is, kind of taking a look at where they can serve others. Probably one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King is what you it's not what the world has done for you, but what you've done for others, to paraphrase. And so I kind of live my life through that lens of what I've done for others. And I think that P&G is one of those brands who really puts that filter on the things that they do. Aside from serving their consumers, they're absolutely serving their community. General Motors is another brand. Old Navy, even Yelp. I think that a lot of these brands have been doing this for years. The ones I'm really proud of are the ones that have stepped up to the plate this year, though. Seeing the value. I mean, we have to acknowledge what a crazy year and a half this has kind of been for us, going through the pandemic and the racial tensions. So when we talk about how consumers really attach to brands that have a POV, I think this year has really been a huge stress test. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think it definitely for organizations has been a big stress test, how they've supported their employees through the pandemic, and then also how they've articulated their stance on the systemic racism and injustices that we've seen. And the brands that aren't just, as you said, like it's not just about the words, but it's about the actions they're doing. It's about how are they, championing diverse voices, both internally and externally, and how are they supporting those communities? And there's one thing, that I wanted to share that we're doing at Discover. And then I also wanted to, Vanessa, just talk about like your work at Ben, because you, especially, talking about, really championing diverse voices, you do such great work at Ben. And I think I definitely want to dig into that with you. But at Discover this past year, for us, we did have commitments, monetary commitments to communities. We had a campaign that really focused on giving back to Black-owned restaurants during the pandemic, during a time when we saw our restaurants all over the country shuttering because of just what was happening. But then we also this past year, and really where, a project that I've had the opportunity and to be so grateful to be a part of is we actually are providing jobs back into the community and opened up a new customer care center on the south side of Chicago in the Chatham area, and are really focused on being a good community partner. And so really doubling down on the efforts and activities we already had and saying, how can we give back more? And it's monetary, but it's also commitment and being in the communities and a partner in the communities. And so in creating jobs. So I'd love to hear, Vanessa, would you share a little bit more about the work that you're doing with Ben? Because I think everyone would love to hear more about that.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. First of all, I love what Discover is doing in the community. That is something that we pride ourselves at Ben as well. You know, being very focused on the community at large and focusing on different diversity segments as well. As I mentioned before, you know, many companies have been doing this for quite some time now, just amplifying our efforts. So to that end, you know, at Ben, we both focus on influencers and content creators and storytellers, and integrating brands into these stories in very organic ways, right? So, but one of the things that we have the opportunity to do here is to really position some of our diverse storytellers, right? And the ones that come from, you know, different segments. I think that for us, lifting the diverse voices in Hollywood, it's important because it reflects the conversations that are happening in many homes across America, and beyond America, to be frank. And we see that in the way how our content travels and how global content travels to the United States as well. But in amplifying these diverse voices, what we're finding is that we are actually empowering storytellers that potentially might not have had an opportunity to get some of their work across the finish line. Why? Because brands are investing in their storytelling by just simply creating campaigns through Ben and creating opportunities to provide financial support and support through products that help to really bring these stories to life and make them real. I think one of the things I hate the most seeing is like if someone's drinking like a can of beer or a can of soda and it just says pop on the side of the can, like that's not real life to me. Like it's great to see that someone is drinking Coca-Cola or someone is drinking Mountain Dew, you know. Those are real life brands, and so to be able to bring them to life through story and to be able to utilize that as a tool to empower diverse storytellers is something that I think is you know, very special about the work that we do at Ben. And I actually am hoping that we get to take it one step further, because work like what you do and work like what P&G does in terms of really focusing on the community, sometimes that wonderful work does not get seen by consumers, you know? And because we do know that consumers tend to favor brands that have a POV and that are aligned with community work, I think it would be great to find ways to organically integrate those stories of the wonderful work that you're doing within the storytelling. Because at the end of the day, the producers, the writers, the directors, they all have the power to create some really amazing narratives.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, it again goes back to like that intersection where, you know, consumers are really looking at brands and they want to see themselves in the work. They want to know the commitments that they have, and then they will also want to understand, you know, that it's long term, right? That this is sustainable, and it's long-term commitments that they're making. And so I think that's super important. And, you know, at Discover, you know, my team really focuses on celebrating and giving the microphone to our employees and sharing their stories. And, you know, we would love to have every single employee at our company actually share their stories, because there's so many different aspects of diversity. And so obviously, like we really focus on race and ethnic identification, and gender identification, but there's so many intersections to that, right? And just each story, I think, you know, helps people, you know, start to really understand, is there truly belonging in this company? Like, do people truly feel like they can be themselves, they can be honest? And so that's kind of the mission that we're on. And I know we share that passion of just celebrating and championing stories from diverse communities, as well as just from diverse, from our colleagues and you know, the content creators that you work with. So
Yeah. I love how you touch on company values. I mean, I think one of the things that attracted me to Ben as an employer is the fact that they really do truly present themselves company value first. Like, I think that when I met the organization as a candidate, that was the one thing that struck a chord with me. The fact that I met them and I saw them from their simplest forms in terms of values, and then backed out to what the business looks like, and how you manifest those values through the business. So I really would like to talk a little bit more about company values, because I think you and I are both seeing that, as you're looking at bringing talent into the workforce, that this is something that continues to be increasingly important.
The students, that are graduating from university now, over 70% are really digging into a company's commitments to DE&I. They want to understand, what does their representation look like now? What are their goals for the future? So it's incredibly important, and it has to be real. They truly want to see, and the authenticity, the honesty of where people are in the journey. I think that just being honest about kind of where people are on their journey and the commitments that they're making for the long term, I think are incredibly important. And I think, going back to some of the examples that you were talking about, we see companies like Target that are talking about their long-term goals. They have short-term goals, but they're also talking about the long-term goals, goals of 2025, that they're giving $2 billion. They want to, focus on Black-owned businesses in their stores and retail. So, back to your point, that is the ethos of a company, and that permeates out in terms of how they are seen by consumers, and it's critical. And the companies that I think have been less vocal, I think that's okay that they're figuring it out, right? And hopefully they're doing that from a true place of learning and understanding within their organizations. I think that's so important. And so one other thing I wanted to ask you about, Vanessa, because it is such a passion of mine, and I think so important in this conversation, is the topic of sponsorship, and not just having mentors that help you, but you had shared a story when we were catching up before that really resonated with me, on just in terms of how passionate you are about this work, and how, as you shifted into this work, hearing, well, you don't have experience in this work, you're not, you haven't been doing this for the last 10 years, and that Ben, has given you an opportunity to really focus and drive this work forward at the organization. And it just got me thinking about how important sponsorship is, right? Because it's not just about, being able to see people like you within a company, is so important, but it's also the people who are sitting at that table when the doors close and are going to advocate on your behalf and really believe in you, and that we have those sponsors. So I'm just curious. I don't know if you'd want to share a little bit more about your story, but how what you think about sponsorship in context of this conversation.
Wow. That's such a great question, for me in particular, because diversity comes into play here. I started my career long ago. I won't say how many years ago, but when I did, one of the about a quarter of the way into my career, I had someone who looked at me and saw potential. And at that time, when you look at the different diversity segments, a lot of people think, well, it's gonna be that Black woman who sees you from above and helps to lift as she's climbing. In my case, it was this wonderful guy who is now still one of my dearest friends. His name is Tim Rasta. And he was on the board, or is on the board, for Staying Alive, and worked as a VP of integrated marketing in MTV. And Tim really put me in places that I was not used to being. And it's funny, because in those places I had an opportunity to be my authentic self. I'm talking about being that lone, Black face in a room with CMOs, with CEOs, with, and really feeling sometimes like, wow, I'm really the only face in here. But at the same time, feeling empowered because I had someone behind me who believed in me, and who continued to push me forward because he saw, the passion and the talent within me. I've taken that approach myself, by making sure that I look back and pull others with me. Have been blessed to have some amazing mentees that I've seen grown in their career. Some of them have even gone far surpassed me, but that's fine because the fact of the matter is that, they're doing the same thing that I did. They saw the value of what I did. I saw the value in what Tim did. And now there's a group of young, fresh, underrepresented voices that I, can be proud to say that I've had an opportunity to help usher in through my own personal work and then through the work of the people who I've inspired and pulled along with me. It's so important. That's when, when we talk about representation mattering, it's not just seeing the face, but it's actually people peeling back the layers, all those intersectional layers, and looking at each other human, eye to eye, and seeing who we are at the core, and seeing the value of who we are at the core, and really pulling someone along. It's so important.
It really is. And that's why I feel so grateful for the work and being part of doing employer brand work now, because, it starts with our hiring process, it starts with our development programs, and really ensuring that we are creating, changing our processes, changing our approach to that. And I think as marketers, as you said before, that we are ensuring that we are creating a team that is able to, that feels comfortable sharing their different points of view, that are bringing different skill sets and are bringing different, backgrounds and experiences, because that's how we create such stronger content and work. And so thank you for sharing that story. And I think I'm sure that resonated with so many, because we remember those people, remember the people that were there for us and that bet on us and bet on our potential, and remember the people that didn't. And just how important it is, as you were saying, to give back, and that every aspect of that counts. Like one conversation counts and helps to really lift someone up, especially if they're in a time that they're just, especially, and you also brought this up, Vanessa, when we were catching up, just having this conversation as we're kind of closing out Mental Health Awareness Month, and at such a time where we all do need more support, and seeing the leaders that are being really honest and open about what they need, and giving their teams permission to also feel comfortable sharing that.
That's a really great point because I think that that is the setup for how I ended up in this role. So, as much as I thank Tim for pulling me along the way, I wouldn't be where I am obviously without him. But our CEO at Ben, Ricky Ray Butler, and also Erin Schmidt, who's my direct boss, both of them have truly empowered me, and supported me along this journey. The fact that they took a chance on me, the fact that they believed, and that they saw the passion that I brought to the table, not only for my work as a marketer and a strategist, but also for my community and for my coworkers and for my team. I mean, I just truly love, my coworkers. It's almost a bit sickening how I am a cheerleader for a company and for the work that we do. But it's true. I mean, it's so important for a company to look at, what their employees bring to the table besides the numbers and the spots and the dots, right? So you kind of, when you're looking at company culture and organizational culture, I think, one of the things that we note is that obviously everyone is here as a business, right? But you kind of have to take a step back and look and see where those organizational cracks are. Where is it? What is it that is attracting talent to one company or one organization versus another? What is it that they're seeing that feels, authentic and feels real? I know the way I talk about Ben, I've had several people come to me and say, "Hey, are they hiring?" Which we are, but what do you think that, people are really looking for when they are looking into the next company that they want to spend a lot of their time with?
You're absolutely right, Vanessa. Because we spend more time with our colleagues and at work than a lot of times with our own family, and so it has to be the right fit. And what's been really interesting about doing this work is articulating culture is such a hard thing, and that's why being able to see fit and being having that friction of this is what we stand for, this is our values, and this is what we're not. I think it's important for companies to be able to do so that candidates can really kind of select into that, because through the process, it becomes so transactional. It's so much about like, these are the skills we're looking for. This is the type of background we're looking for. Do you fit? Or in taking assessments and all that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, the person that's going to be successful has value alignment, as you were saying before. And, this past year, I had the fortune just this other week to hear Heidi Brooks, who is a lecturer at Yale, who's written a lot of articles about organizational culture, about organizational change, and in particular through this time of how this whole past year has been a stress test for them. And to your point, it has really shown the impact of the cracks in their systems and their approaches, how they approach hiring, how they approach retention, how they are providing a culture where people do feel like they belong or don't. And even I think as we think about, going back into the offices and what this new model is going to look like, having truly understanding employees and where they're at and meeting them where they're at is going to be so important, because everybody's going to be at a different place. And the companies that aren't going, just kind of have a one size fits all approach to how they're going to treat their employees, we're going to see mass exoduses. And, already I'm starting to hear that. I don't know if you are, from friends who are feeling that and stressed about, well, wait a second, I still have to care for my elderly parents. Like, our situation changed. It's been a year and a half.
Right.
And so there's so much in this, and I think it's been an important stress test for organizations to really focus on their, really articulating what's important to them, and where they want to be in the world. What is the place that they want to play for in society, both as a company, as an employer.
So you bring up, you mentioned retention, which I love that you mentioned that, because that is something that a lot of people are thinking about, as there have been mass exoduses, and now as we're beginning to bounce back, there are opportunities for employment at different companies. So you kind of have to take a look at, like, what are these benefits? How is the company that you're working with really providing a support system? And I think, and how are they looking into the psychological health of their employees? As we mentioned, we are at the end of Mental Health Awareness Month, and the last year that we've gone through obviously has not only been a stress test on organizations, but on people as well, as they look to rebalance their life. And now that we're going back into, a lot of people are going back into offices and back into hybrid models. And there are a lot of questions. Like, I saw an article the other day: if you thought working from home was messy, wait till you start hybrid work. And so, the stress of just like going back into the office, managing your workflow, taking care of your family members that kind of started to depend on you now to be in the home, it's really, I think a lot of things are going to come into play when you look at retention. And one of that, as I mentioned, is like the psychological help. So what would you recommend for companies that are looking to provide the best benefits that they can in that space to their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a topic that's close to my heart, because I do think that employees' needs have changed. And as an employer, and this is where, again, I think culture and values come in, it's so important, of do you understand? Do you know what your employees need? Are you listening to them? Are you hearing them? And thinking about that in context of business, of course. But certainly for a business like Discover, our employees are the business. They really are. It's the experience that we create for our customers. And so if we're not supporting our employees and they're not happy, we're not going to be successful. So I think to your point, really thinking about, and especially as a mother and as a working mom, I think I'm scared about some of the gaps we still have with childcare. And you're mentioning taking care of elderly parents, that's still something we haven't solved for. And so I think companies need to get a little creative and think about what are some other aspects of benefits that they could potentially give to their employees to help support them through this transition. And so, we're very much still in the beginning of this journey, but for our agents, our customer service agents, and we have over 5,000 of them, we are offering complete flexibility. They can work from home. They can be part-time in the office. They can be part-time at home, and they can really choose that flexibility. We're giving complete flexibility to our employees because we do want to meet them where they're at. And we realize that they've been successful at home. And if that's the model that fits them and they're going to be happier there, we want to support that. But those, the individuals that do want to be back in an environment that they can be, with each other, we want to be able to support that as well.
Great points. And yeah, I've definitely seen some companies that are looking forward or leaning into a hybrid model or a work from home, or I think there was one like that there was like no real rule per se. You could just choose to work from home if you wanted to. So kudos to the companies that are really, opening the door and are listening. I think we talked about that a little bit. Like listening is so important. Deep listening is so important. Yesterday I had the opportunity to participate in an empathy workshop that I brought in to my company as a part of our DE&I program. And this was focused on leadership. And one of the great things that I saw was that it felt as though the leadership team, they were really listening to each other, but it was in a much more intimate way. Because and I think it possibly was because we weren't necessarily talking about the numbers of it all, but we were talking about the feelings. And I think one of the best things that I saw that came out of that workshop was I saw one of my coworkers who I've always felt like, kind of looked like you couldn't tell like if he was really happy or if he was just okay. I saw a bit of vulnerability in him yesterday that made me respect him 10 times more than I already had, because through that empathy workshop, we had, an opportunity to see the real him outside of, the work that he brought to the table. I think it's something that is critical as we're moving into this next phase of what working from home and what life looks like for our employees. Like, how are we being empathetic? How are we listening to them? How are we understanding what they're saying and taking some action steps that will help make their work life better?
Absolutely, Vanessa. And I would just adding on that point, and I think it's amazing that you did that. You brought in, you did an empathy session for your leaders. I mean, that's incredible. I think and I see there's a question in the chat just about kind of where to start with some companies that haven't done a lot in this area. I think that's exactly it. And I would also say that companies that don't have the resources internally to do this, right? Like they don't have the teams, they don't have the expertise to bring in experts and to allow kind of a third party unbiased. I was hearing from a friend about their company. They brought in a psychologist to be on staff with them through this past year. And really facilitated a lot of open conversations with their employees to really try to create more of that, safety and that openness. So I think that is where it starts, because you're not going to know where you're not going to know the true depths of issues, or where there's opportunity to really make change in a company without understanding and without really getting to. And there was a question, that I had heard about, what is not safe to talk about here, right? And that's a scary question to ask. And are we comfortable? Is that even, are people going to even answer that, right? And so if people don't answer that question, oh God, we have a lot of work to do. So I think it's such a great point, and just starting to open up that dialogue and allowing people to understand that there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in it, but it's okay. And that we come curious. We're curious about people's different experiences and want to learn. I think that's the best place to start.
I'm glad that you said that. Curious about experiences and wanting to learn, and kind of, I want to touch back really quickly before we dive into some questions about experiences and how important it is to share them, because we do come from all different backgrounds. So my company, we have a ton of people from Provo, Utah, Los Angeles. We have offices in New York, Shanghai, London. I'm working out of Miami right now, or close to Miami. So, when you look at people coming from all different places, and the different personalities they bring into the workplace, I think the workplace is now more open more than ever to have these very important and very difficult conversations. And I appreciate that I happen to work at a workplace that understands that, and empowers me to help lead in some of that discussion, and bring them to the forefront. I think that when we start to understand different backgrounds, we start to understand what makes people think and work in the manner that they do. And I think it's so important now more than ever that that organizations invest back into their employees in that way, because investing into your employees is really investing into the business. So, and I'd love to hear your point of view on just what kind of investment you think businesses need to make to the into their employees.
Yeah, absolutely, Vanessa. And I would say, one thing we're doing at Discover, and I'm hopeful that there's other companies, that are doing this. But first, understanding the differences in the employee experience across different groups, especially our underrepresented minorities at the company. How is their experience different? What are those differences, to really start to paint a picture of where we have our deepest work to do. And so I would say that that's kind of the starting point, right? Like, you have to first understand the elements of that. You can't just expect to know that. It really takes time to start to diagnose where the opportunities within your organization lie, where there's opportunity to really dig in and do the deep work. And then, I think also we've seen this past year that organizations are focusing on this. They're putting teams together, they're putting task force together, they're thinking about both the internal components of it and then also what they're going to be doing externally. And so I think also starting to really outline those long-term goals, and showing your employees progress. I think that's the other big thing, right? Like, we have these longer term goals. What is the progress we're making towards those? And how can we continue to be part of that conversation, keep the conversation going, and just really, cultural change, organizational change of any kind is can be challenging, and it's definitely nuanced, but certainly this type of change, in terms of practices and how we work, is the biggest.
Yes, and I think, as I lead into this next question, I think when we start looking at our brand partners or our agency partners, right? I think a lot of us like to align ourselves with agencies and partners that have very similar philosophies and a very similar DNA in that sense, right? So we do have a question here that kind of speaks to that. I just before I get to it though, I do want to touch on the fact that it's so great when you do have the opportunity to work with brands like that. And so I'm consistently seeking, brands that have that similar DNA to Ben so that we can align ourselves in and make the commitment that we're making to the community that much stronger because it's their, ability to empower, our ability to connect them to storytellers that can really because I do believe in the power of storytelling and how it has the ability to change things that can really make some stories enriched, right? And so and a lot of brands are asking for this. They're asking to connect to diverse content creators. How is Discover benchmarking the DEI data of their existing marketing agencies? This is a question that came in from Dave Edwards.
Yes, thank you for the question, Dave. So supplier diversity has been an initiative at Discover for a while, but in this past year, we've actually dedicated more resources to really focusing and auditing our partners and exactly what you're talking about, Vanessa, just really looking at when we're going to the market for a new partner or, a new activity that we are handling that in a way that we can truly get strong representation and focus on various types of companies. And we're not just kind of always going back to that same supplier list. So that's been a big effort of ours. And I'm so proud of the team that's been working on that because, for example, with our new customer care center, our Chatham Center, we focused on wanting supplier diversity through that. And in particular, ensuring that we were choosing companies to support our efforts in the community, that it wasn't just about, Black-owned businesses, but it was also about businesses in the community that were already there, that were already doing work. So great question. And it's something that I think is really top of mind for us.
That is, yeah, definitely a great question. Another one that we've got here is from Marcella. And Marcella's question is, how can we help guarantee that investments in our employees continue to happen moving forward after COVID-19 hopefully gives us a real break?
Great question, Marcella. Thank you for that question. I would say that, again, it goes back to, for employees, things have changed and they're going to have a different perspective on the work-life balance that they need in terms of physically being in an office and where they feel comfortable doing work. And so I think, companies have to really start by understanding what does that look like? When we were doing surveys at Discover, the majority of employees said they still wanted to have flexibility. They still wanted the opportunity to work from home when they wanted, right? And so our leadership team is taking that into account and thinking about that in context of the work and the different areas of the business, because it is hard, right? There's different areas where collaboration and in-person collaboration can really drive innovation more quickly. And so what are some of the tools that we need to be able to continue to create that if we're not always in the same environment? And I think especially for global companies, they've been doing this for years. And so, who's doing it well? How can we continue to learn from them?
Great answer. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been an amazing conversation. And I think the best part about it was that I think I have found someone who I can look forward to connecting with after this is all done for some mentorship. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Same, Vanessa. I look forward to catching up with you.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, I appreciate you both. So thank you for coming onto the stage and fostering such important conversations today. It's so needed within the brand community and can't wait to see you back soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, moving on to the last and final session of the day, we have another group of amazing speakers